I so appreciate everyone coming the morning after, the night before. So in my favorite city of Nashville, I hope you all had a fabulous time. And if you didn't, that is on you, because it is always fun here. So I have really enjoyed and appreciate the conversation around integration. In fact, the minute that I knew that that was going to be the theme, I called up Michelle and said, I have to speak because this is actually what I do. Now, obviously Sunset talks a lot around integration and you think about it from data. And I am here to actually talk about the people and the processes to make this happen. Let me give you a little bit of context because you saw me yesterday and I had the opportunity to sort of already be on stage, which is also ridiculously generous of your organizers to allow me to jump up here twice. But let me give you a little context to the way I think about successfully adopting software. So I have 15 years in, well, 25 years actually in dentistry now, but the first 15 I spent managing a multi-doctor, one location, 18 operatory group practice, fell in love with it that way. But from there, worked briefly for a DSO, and then built the customer success program for Dentrix Ascend, which is, of course, Henry Schein's cloud-based software, and built that, frankly, over about 5.5 years until Ascend became really their top seller. So I had the opportunity to then work foundationally in practice management for dentistry, and then kind of got to see the technology side and what that really looks like. So I have a unique perspective, I believe, both from working for the technology firm as well as understanding what is it like to really deliver care, and a little bit of insight there. That was my family's practice. It was my father's practice. It was my mom who did the financial arrangements, but it wasn't small. We had 7 doctors in every specialty. So it was a really interesting and great way to get started. So a year ago, though, I decided, you know what, have had a ball so far, but I'm seeing a real need in the marketplace for someone to actually come and work for the DSO. So I decided that what I'm going to focus my consulting on for optimized dental consulting, and Brian is right, I had another name, and only because I could get the website, it was terrible. Anyway, so this is far, far better, because what I try and do is, and I will talk about today, whether you are implementing brand new practice management software or analytics software or whatever you've decided to purchase, or you simply want to optimize what you already have, that is the work that I do. And we're gonna talk through it. And the handout that I gave you, which I'm gonna get a little bit more into, is the idea to really give you some takeaways by the time that we're done this morning. And as you also well know, I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I am independent consulting, and I also, of course, work with Revere, and that's why I had the opportunity to facilitate that masterclass. And I think those things actually work pretty nicely together. So it's been interesting to me, even in the last 6-8 months of being independent and getting the opportunity to get really more into the door of the DSO and not from them, okay, you're just the vendor. I really can see that actually achieving standardization is more than just buying the software and even more than just putting it in all of your locations. So we all know what the pain, we talk about this a lot, the pain of not having standardized practice management software everywhere is. And in our industry, we have watched even sort of the stalwarts that said, I don't have to implement the same practice management everywhere. I can simply add an analytics overlay, and that's all I have to do. And even those organizations, frankly, they're all moving and selecting a practice management software. So we know the pain. And really the decision then is, step one is making the decision that you will in fact pick one practice management software across all of your locations. And then the next step is, of course, going live. And I used to think, check mark from the vendor's perspective, now we've done it. And I actually think that is now where you start. That is where you now can begin to standardize your processes, because we have so many bad habits left over from still doing things the old-fashioned way when we had servers in every location, that's a transition. And so the best practices that I'm going to share today are all around how do we start once we're actually at the beginning. And again, you heard me talk a little bit about my friend Tom. I'm excited because the conversations that were in the panels yesterday, everyone really seems to be talking about this is such a challenge and the people are the challenge and all of this. And that now people are going to focus on same-store growth. I believe if you already have cloud-based software, you don't even have to spend a ton more money. You can simply do better with what you have. So speaking of that, and why would you want to do it if you haven't made the decision that you want to standardize on practice management in the first place, maybe let's talk about a couple of the reasons why. I snatched this graph from the ADA, And effectively, it's saying that our dentists, hard data, are making less money. And the reason in this article that this is happening is because the costs are going up. And you guys know this. It is expensive to manage and run a DSO or a dental practice. And so getting yourself towards standardization, it saves mountains of time. You could obviously run multi-location reports as opposed to one here and one here and one here. I'm still hearing so many stories of everyone remote logging in or happy to discover an option that maybe they won't quite have to do that, or turning to an analytics platform that then they don't trust the numbers because they don't really know how that's being used at the location level. It obviously drives your accuracy and confidence, because so many of the time when I hear someone starting about a plan to move from server-based over to a cloud-based system, they say, I just don't trust my numbers. And if you don't trust them to be able to make good, solid business decisions, how can your investors trust what you're doing? And you need to be able to implement your model efficiently, and that's another benefit of being standardized. I feel like in this room, you guys get this concept, so let me kind of jump in. The reason that I kind of put this together as a checklist, and hopefully I got everyone, if not, we can hook you up. But the idea is, and this is a front and back, this is what I think the major services or the major pieces of implementing software, what they actually are. You can take this home. The idea is that you will walk away with what are the kind of decisions that you need to make to successfully implement software. And I also hope, now that you know that someone in the industry does this very specific piece of work, that if you need a hand, let me know. Let's jump in on workflow assessment. So, and someone's gonna have to make sure that I stay on time, because I have 44 minutes and 59 seconds from now on. So jumping in, I believe that the way that it makes sense to begin any software implementation project is actually understanding what's current state. So kind of my little bubbles across the bottom. I want to start out by, and the way I always begin, is a thorough, comprehensive understanding. How are things working now? From all the way at the practice level, how are you welcoming your patients, and what does the payment processing look like? What forms and what's happening there? Are you still printing route slips and documenting everything by hand and then turning around and re-entering it in the computer? What does the entire workflow look like for your controller who's running doctor's compensation? What is the entire system? And then I think this is best done by someone who also then can turn around and benchmark that against the software that you would prefer to work with. That way then, or perhaps against the software you're already using. I do this right now, and it's always interesting, even as you're doing the conversation with the people, to say, okay, so have you heard of XYZ feature? And then they say, well, maybe I've heard of it, but I haven't had time to dig in and actually set this up. And so there can be some real opportunities. Especially around finding the gaps. So what I see pretty often, I recently had the opportunity to do this. Thank you, I appreciate the time warning. Good, because I'm just gonna go. So you're gonna have to come and pull me off. So I had the opportunity recently, I worked in a 15 location group out in Vegas. They have 10 locations on Denticon and wanted to bring 5 more on. And before they did that, they said, I'd like to make sure we're using our revenue cycle features to the top, effectively the top of their license, right? The highest level features in the software, so that when we add the next locations on, we're getting the most value. Great. That gives us an opportunity then to see what is current state and then where are the gaps. That also then lets us say, all right, are there any quick wins? Because then when I can come in and see, and we look at the numbers and we look at all the systems in place, now I can find, there might be a really nice opportunity around text to pay, for example. And if anyone's heard me speak before, I am a huge believer and have seen this and worked, like Brian said, I've been doing this for a number of years, and I have seen text to pay work. It's almost like a simple faucet, and when you actually text your patient, they click the button and can pay you, it's amazing how much they will do so. But the next piece is when you have this current state and you identify the gaps, because now you know, here's how things are being done, but here's actually what we can do in the software. Now that gives you a chance to make some decisions about where do you really want to put your resources. It allows you to prioritize what's most important, and then you can define, all right, if I can see my, I've got $300,000, it's over 120 days on guarantor portion. If I can implement text to pay, can I get half that back? So it really helps you make decisions. And if I'm talking 150 grand, because some of this over 90 might be closer to 6, 12 months, you're not getting that money, right? You know that. But what can that look like? And so you can start to have some real understanding of how much can you drive, which then again says, hey, if we're going to run out of timely filing, we might as well put some real resources around, and that's why I like e-assist or someone like that, right? Because you can make decisions on where they should fit. And then that also allows you to optimize what resources you have in your organization. I also make a love note down here about who leads this. So if you're the CEO and you walk in and think you're going to do this current state analysis, friends, all of your team will say, everything is great. Everything is perfect. We have no problems. There's no concerns. You will never find out what's actually happening. I think it's really helpful to find someone in your organization that they will talk to, that knows both dentistry and your systems and can ask the right questions, but also knows your software. So be thoughtful about who does that. So in this first section, some decisions to make. Who can provide this kind of workflow assessment? What deliverable will you receive? When I do one of these, you end up with pretty much a scorecard, kind of red, green, yellow. What's going well? Congratulations, you got some things that are going really well and you're using your software well. Maybe some yellow, there's a little bit of opportunity, and there's some real concerns in some specific areas that maybe you do or don't know about. And those, in my opinion then, you can get a recommendation about what you want to work on. And then who's going to make the decisions? Often when you can see, all right, here's the gap between how we're doing it now and what really could be done in the software, it's going to require a change in workflow. Are you going to make that? You have to make the decision, who will make the authorization that we are going to change this? Because that change can be painful and difficult, and I'm not hiding that fact because this stuff is hard. So that leads me into project management. Your project manager, especially if you're implementing new practice management software, they are the absolute driving force behind this project. So select someone who is obviously detail-oriented, can connect all the dots, can get everything scheduled, keep all the trains running on time, but their communication skills are absolutely critical. My opinion, this person does not have to come from dentistry. In fact, they can be someone on your IT team. You can outsource a project manager. But you have to make sure that you make that decision then around who is the right project manager for you. And moving next step, what practices will be best for a pilot. I had a whole slide and a whole ton of information on this, and there's no world that I could stay anywhere near on time and get through that. But if you want to have more conversations about how to pick a pilot, that's something else we can dig into. And the last piece of this, when we think about kind of this overall project management, is kind of getting back to Sunset that's hosting this. Who is your IT resource, and how do you partner together so that the actual hardware and the networking requirements, that can be so much smoothed out. Your office managers, if they have to be involved in the trial download of data or the final upload that has to happen at a specific time and is really critical so that the conversion happens on time, frankly, that stresses them out. They're afraid they're going to screw it up, and they don't want to upset you. If you've already got workstations that your IT team is already logged into and monitoring, there's no reason not to use those same team members, and actually you'll have probably more confidence that they're going to get it done and right and accurate, and you won't have to worry about that as much. So, and they also can, if you have any sort of cloud-based imaging that needs a driver installed, now you save all of the stress. And now on site, while you're getting trained, you're also having someone just confirm that the x-rays all can be captured. Little things that help smooth a very stressful time. So let's talk a minute also about change management. So change management can be sort of viewed as a nice to have, but this graph tells you, this is ProSci. They do certifications and change management training across the country for a variety of different industries, et cetera. And they have found that if you actually invest in change management principles, you have a 6-time better chance of actually accomplishing what you're going for. So this, to me, this tells you, you can bake this in to your project management. So for this next slide or two, I've talked a little bit about what are the challenges and the solutions. What are some of the things that I'm seeing that I think can work really well when you think about change management? So if you are at conferences like this and you're trying to make decisions about what practice management software you want to use or an add-on feature that you're considering implementing, you've been thinking about it, you've been planning, you've been talking to vendors, you've been going to conferences, and your team has zero idea of this. Your doctors don't know, your office managers don't know what's going on, your clinical team absolutely has no idea. So one of the biggest challenges with change management is remembering What you know is not the same as what they're aware of. And so actually being fully committed to the communication of your team, and then what that's gonna look like. So if the challenge is the communication and engagement, then the answer, my experience, is that you have to create some content around that. And that doesn't, since I've worked in software for so long, it's the software company's job to focus on the data, to get you the training, to make sure the product works as designed. And that's what their checklist for implementation will focus on. This is your job. You are responsible to make sure that you create the content to explain, why are we doing this? What resources have we put in place to make you successful? What's our timeline that we're expecting? How will we know that this is successful? Magically, these are all items that are on this handout that I'm going to be talking through today. You thinking through all these pieces and then putting them together. And then you have to decide who in your organization is going to create this content. A, what are you going to say? So while I say your project manager does not have to come from dentistry, the person that's creating this content 100% has to. And this may need to be one of your top level operations team members who understands why you're doing this. So, and that can even be, in my experience too, you think, oh, well, we'll just pull in. We need to create effectively marketing communications. This is internal marketing. Our marketing person never has time. Never. They're already a million miles an hour because there's usually one or two out of an entire DSO. So this usually is going to fall somewhere into the project manager or pulling someone. But it's that critical that you add it, I think, as one of the number one things. Who is going to create the content? What is the messaging? And then how will it get delivered? Next, another gap that I see is training and skill gaps. I have watched multiple, I shouldn't say this. I've watched a group, it was 20 locations in Chicago. They really wanted to move into a new software and they could not because their main lead did not want to lose her expertise in the old system. She just couldn't stand not being the expert anymore. And so that training and skill gap is real. It will stop a project in its tracks, and no one will really know why it never seemed to take hold. So what I'm finding is you need to be thinking about, and a lot of our software companies are already here, role-based training. And I'm a huge believer in, because they're gonna provide you the training resources, they're gonna provide you the online training, they're gonna provide you software trainers who are amazing. It is your job then to decide how much you want to hold your team accountable for actually getting into the software and at least doing a couple of things. Require them to schedule an appointment, to create a treatment plan, to do something. I honestly don't even care what that is, but give them 3 specific things by their role so that their hands are in it and they've seen the software. Do not allow the situation where the first time they see the software is after the conversion is started and the trainer has walked up in front of them and now they're seeing what it looks like for the first time. That is where you have failed your team. They will resist and it makes it so much harder for you to actually accomplish the successful implementation that you're hoping for. Let's see, data migration. This again, right to the heart of the data and the conversion and all of that. The trick is, friends, and now that I've worked and I get to see multiple different software packages, no one wants to bring over old AR, and so there is going to be some cleanup. Actually, a past client of mine said, no one likes to clean, we're not calling it cleanup, I'm gonna call it auditing. And I was thinking, I'm not sure we wanna be audited either, but we'll go with it. So if you go ahead and plan in advance, there are things that will not convert. What is your plan around that? Your software team is gonna tell you what does or doesn't convert. So what do you do with that information? Plan ahead. If you need to set up the insurance plan, carrier, fee schedules, et cetera, and make sure that every single patient that's coming in at least 2 days in advance has everything connected and set up so you can get an accurate insurance estimate, guess what, friends? That works on you. And how you've organized it and how you oversee it, that is not gonna come from your software company. That is your responsibility. And often if your project manager doesn't come from dentistry, they don't know that that's going to stress out your team. And it's so incredibly critical. If you don't get your insurance estimates set up in a conversion, guess what your team will not do? They will not collect from your patients because they don't trust the system. They don't know how much they really should collect. So these all really fit together, I think, to end up with a more successful result. I hear a lot around, I don't want to close my practice to train. And I understand the pain of not having production for a day or maybe 2, depending on what your process is. However, I would tell you, we are actual humans, and as much as you'd like to think that I can actually learn a new software while I'm still processing patients, it's just not reality. And I've seen it way too many times. Like I said, we don't do the work, we don't actually learn the software, we stop collecting, and then somebody's in the back room, I kid you not, crying, because this is a horrible day, and they feel stupid, and there's no way they could possibly get all this work done. And that's your first day with the software? Don't do that. So I'm a big believer, close for training. Now that does not need to be all day for 8 hours. You can plan ahead. You can say, we're gonna do a few hours in the morning. We're gonna use the remote. You're gonna give them some homework. Like, it can be a process, but at some point there's still gonna need to be some time that no matter what your training approach is, that is the focus for your team. I also believe in blowing a little air into your schedule when you go live and having some on-site resources, which gets so much easier after the first few locations because now you have friends and neighbors that you can invite to come over for the morning or the afternoon that already know this and can do a little bit of the, it's gonna be okay, we figured this out, we'll help you, I can do this one, you watch me. Those little things are not little. And when you're worried about loss of productivity, well then take a step back. You're planning this. Look at the entire month. If you know I'm gonna take these offices live these 3 Fridays in a row, then go back that whole month or the month before or after and say, I'm gonna add an extra half day, or we're gonna really look to see, can we pump up the production? We can see what our numbers are, so plan ahead, or plan after, right? But you can solve this problem and still give your team the respect, my opinion, and the time they need to be trained well. Lastly, just plan for it. You're gonna have some friends and neighbors that don't wanna do this. They don't wanna change. It doesn't matter what your training is. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't how much matter you communicate, all the things. They're just gonna struggle. And so just plan for that and know that you're just going to keep talking through, and that's why you created the content in the first place of why are we doing this? So when they refuse or when they passively just don't learn it or nobody told me, etc., then you can follow up. I also think it's really important, we focus so much, you're going live, you learn this new information, we transition your data. Now be considerate that by the time it comes end of month, that would be the first time they're actually sending statements and figuring out a collections process and running their reporting and all those pieces. So have in your mind, what's the additional training you're gonna have after end of month? Again, the software company is done. Like we did our job we gave you the data, we've got all of it, it's running, awesome. You can then plan for what does end of month look like. So a few decisions to make. Your executive champion, who's going to create the messaging, and how will you train your teams. Success metrics. This is my favorite. I've had the opportunity to speak on analytics in a couple of different conferences, and I like how all of this fits together because nobody switches software for fun. This is a PricewaterhouseCoopers report or study that they did. They sent out a survey to all these different companies to say, all right, if you are working in a cloud-based system, what they've called the top 10% of those companies, they decided they were going to be cloud, they called it cloud-powered. And so you can see in this giant sort of, checklist on the side, in all of these areas, if you've effectively, or if you're using technology successfully, then these are all the benefits that you're getting. And they called out in this report like 4 different major points. And I thought number 3 was kind of interesting. 100% of these cloud-powered companies felt they improved decision-making thanks to the way they've used cloud. And again, I bring this up because I like hard data. We were talking about that actually this morning, about how hard it can be to get hard data. But it's a reason that for all the extra things that I am talking about, which can feel extra from what just following an implementation checklist from a software process can be, this is the reason to do it. So this is actually really hard though. Success metrics is the most challenging piece, and this is kind of the process I talk through with my clients. When you're switching to a new practice management software or an analytics platform, what problems do you hope to solve, and what impact would it have on your business if you in fact solve them? And then how would you measure that? Trying to drive them all the way down into how would we measure the success? And I have done this conversation for years, and some organizations really struggle. So I thought it might be helpful today. These are 3 different examples from different clients I've worked with in the past and how they thought about this process. So they all were switching practice management software. The first one said, my goal is I need real-time visibility. That is why I'm switching. And they said, all right, the impact of this, I want to find and figure out what's going on. I remember this organization, their CFO was new to dentistry, and she said, the way I'm managing this organization, and it was a new, very rapidly growing DSO, she was managing the finances based on how much cash she had in the bank account. Had never seen a production number, had never seen collection, had never logged into a dental practice management software because they had 10 or 15 of the darn things. And she's new to dentistry. She wouldn't know which one she should log in or how to get a report. So simply their measure of success was simply being able to see, what is my production? What is my collection? How many new patients? Seems like a low bar, but frankly for them, life-changing. Another organization, in fact, interesting, so many organizations that I talk to, why do you want to switch to cloud-based software? Well, we want to improve the patient experience. Great. What does that mean to you? And almost everyone told me it's billing. Okay, so then what impact would that have? Obviously, they want to get accurate insurance estimates. And then how would they measure? And this organization said, I think we'll see fewer refunds. And they said, we think that because we handle billing so smoothly, that'll actually make it that people will hear about this, they'll feel comfortable, and we'll actually get more patients. Like, okay, you get to pick your measures. And the last one was all around creating efficiency. This was for a group in Louisiana, and they wanted to switch to cloud-based software because they were really concerned about their team. They said, we have got fabulous office managers, but they're spending all of their time working down accounts receivable. They don't have the opportunity to get back into the team and lead and train and coach and do all the great things that they can do for their offices. So we really want to implement a system that will manage and help us with AR so that I can A, improve AR, but B, I can reduce the staff turnover because now my leader actually gets to have time to lead. I also like the approach, and I did this with one of my clients a number of years ago. And again, because you as the DSO have to have the appetite to want to do the extra work to make this successful. So on the last slide where I talk about why would you switch practice management software overall, this specifically is how do you know you're successful at each office conversion. So this one I put together is really the idea came from a project I worked in the past, and at the bottom, I snatched this from Denticon. They have this Smart Assist report card. And what this lets me do is you can run this for any timeline. I recommend wait 1 week after go live and then run a report to see, did we successfully enter payment? Are we collecting emails and cell phones? Are we scheduling the next visit? And are we documenting clinical notes? I figure after the first week, this is what a successful go live looks like. Go live is not success. From a software perspective, we just want to have you get the software. Well, from your perspective, who cares if you've got new software if all of a sudden you can't process any of your claims? I heard a horrible story about that from a group in Vermont not very long ago, and it was 2 months that they could not get paid on insurance for a specific Medicaid plan that they worked with. So that is why I think you making the decisions about what does success look like for you. And that's where I think it's helpful to understand your software, to know, well, what report? This is a piece of cake to run, and now you know what success looks like. Imagine also, this drives your decision-making after the fact. If you, a week later, you're the regional manager and your office manager, and you run this report, and you see your numbers are terrible, guess what? The training didn't take hold. So what do? You don't just give up. Now we go back and we pull them back in. You probably have another office that's coming next on training. They can attend, or you know where you're falling down. So I love the connection between the analytics and the actual successful implementation of software. And just to translate this technical disruption rating, we know how stressful it is on the day of conversion. So this we kind of set on a 1 to 5. What does that look like? Did the data come over right? Can we capture all the images? Did the printers work? Some of the basic things, which is why I'm a huge believer in having my IT team. If it's a large organization, if it's only a few of us, people are going to be cool. But it happens to be our largest organization with 25 operatories and 17 doctors and the whole 9 yards. Put in extra resources to make sure that goes smoothly. So a few decisions to make on this piece. Who's going to define your KPIs? What measurables are you going to pick? And then, like I showed, it's one thing at the overall level, it's another per location. Another piece of this puzzle on successful adoption is how do you set up the darn thing? So there's all kinds of ways to set up our software. And again, I'm going to follow kind of this challenges and solutions approach. The one is kind of this custom setup. Do not assume, and I think I'm just going to jump to the answer on this one. I am a huge fan of software trainers because they know the software so incredibly well. They know what every single button does. They can answer all your questions. They're amazing. But they also generally are trained to facilitate. You tell me what you want, and then I'll set the software up the way that you tell me. So I think what I am seeing is actually taking a step back, and again, as all of this is really kind of additive with these ideas I hopefully have been presenting reasonably effectively, is what are you trying to get out of this? Why are you implementing this? And what is your model? If you are a specialty and referrals are super critical for you, then we need to make sure, how are we setting up the referral sources? No matter what it is, for your payer mix, make sure that you are setting up the HMOs so that you can get the right insurance estimate. That is a different setup than a PPO, et cetera, et cetera. So I like the idea of actually taking a consulting approach for how should we set up the software in the first place in order to get the outcomes that we're looking for. That also kind of moves pretty quickly into not defaulting to status quo. This group in Vegas that I worked with recently, they also said, we're trying to make some decisions. Oh no, different group. Thinking about someone else. I have a group in Florida. They have 20 locations, and they said, even though right now we're completely decentralized, what we're interested in is building a centralized team. So it wouldn't make any sense to set up their software and give every single office manager all of those rights to create plans and carriers and fee schedules and all of this, when frankly, that's not where they want to be. Instead, we need to be thinking, where do you want to go, and planning for the future, and then that's how we actually want to set up the software. And what I've seen is if you are, note to self, going to set up any sort of centralized support office, not even office, but just team members and resources anymore, now that can be a pull system. Guess what? If you'll go live on this software, then I'll be able to offer you insurance verification, and we'll take that claims processing off your back. And now you have a line of people saying, I'd love to get out from under insurance verification. I want to go first. And that's an entirely different thing than, you can't make me, I'm the doctor, you said I didn't have, that sort of conversation. And lastly, I've talked about this a couple of different times. Insurance and AR do not convert. Plan your resources. You can pull in an e-assist, like I said, or something like this to actually make that go much more smoothly. So these are the decision-making pieces on setting up. Who is going to guide the decision-making? In fact, this is so critical. I have heard of a group that had 50 or so offices. They went live with 3 offices on cloud-based software and pulled those back because they didn't have someone that could sort of strongly lead that initiative. So being thoughtful about how this really can work will impact whether you can move forward. Don't assume you've got your first couple offices live and then everything's fine. Things can sadly still fall apart. And again, what resources are available and who's going to create the reports. I didn't get into a bunch of reporting in this presentation, but this is absolutely critical and another piece that you need to be thinking about, especially after your first end of month. And the last piece of the puzzle here is SOP creation. So this is, again, let me kind of share with you a stat or some information from the ADA. So this is, and actually the ADA I think is updating this data every single month, and Marco has been putting this on LinkedIn for all of us. So are you currently recruiting? More than a third are recruiting. So what this tells us, if everybody is hiring, 15 minutes after we just finished our training and go live, they just hired 3 more people, or they finally got the office manager hired right after you went live on the software. There are going to constantly be new team members coming into our practices. So how do we plan for that? I'm a big believer in you write it down, you get it documented. This also helps you because not only does it help you with new hire training, when you do have turnover, we are going to have, sadly, some of the people that are going to come and join your organization, they left somewhere else. And so it makes you less dependent on your team members. But I also am a big believer, you should have someone in your organization before you go live documenting how are we going to use this. And you don't have to write every single detail down. In fact, I'm a big believer of get the big things. How are we going to set up our adjustments? And how do we use the adjustments? What is the basic workflow through the practice? If you have a few of these high-level things documented, now you confirm those once you roll out your pilots, and then you refine, because you're not going to get it all right. It's not possible. And once you're hands-on, now then you have that documented. Now you can effectively go slow to go fast later. And note to self, you can steal a lot of this from the resources that the software company puts out. They have informational articles and they have videos and all this good stuff, but what they don't have is how do you do it? What is your lingo? How do you like to talk about your patients? So this is a really critical piece that you can customize so that your team members speak in the way that you want them to your patients. And again, a couple of decisions to make here about who's going to be the one to decide the SOPs. This is another challenge. There's a lot of folks that they're comfortable working in the practice, but they don't want to tell you how you ought to do it. You have to find somebody at high enough level and confidence that knows your software, that knows your system, that can say, this is best practice and this is what we're going to do. And then where are you going to keep them? And how are you going to actually use them? We have a terrible history in dentistry. We create some great content and then we stuff it under someone's desk, never to be seen again, so don't do that. We made it through, have no idea if I'm ahead or behind, etc. However, these are really the pieces of successful adoption of software, and you have the handout there. And frankly, these are all the things that I do. I am software agnostic, the idea being that I want to work for the DSO so you can actually get the outcome that you're investing in. And this happy little QR code, you can tell I'm a QR code fan, will take you to the contact page of my website. If you want to fill that in or get in touch with me and talk about projects, I would love to help. So thank you very much.